At the beginning of this past week, on Monday, Monday, which happened to be a very auspicious day. It's the full moon in July, is how we think of it. And it's what's called Guru Purnima in India. It's one of the most sacred holidays in which all devotion is offered to the spiritual teacher who is the key to everything. We have our Guru Day event, which we have as close as possible, as is convenient, to the actual full moon. It'll be coming this weekend, next Saturday. Not quite online, but the best we could do. Also on that day, as it happened, a baby was born into the Ananda family at Ananda Village. Peter Kretzmann and his wife Gayatri had a little girl. She came a little early. She was not supposed to come for 3 weeks, but apparently she decided that Guru Purnima was too good an opportunity to pass up. Peter himself was born at Ananda Village, so it's a especially profound family celebration to have yet another generation, third generation there. Babies are real small when they're born, really tiny like this. And there was a picture they sent out with Peter holding his daughter like this, and she's looking at him, and he's looking at her. And you know that for the rest of this incarnation, she's going to have him wrapped around her little finger, and he's going to respond to her every whim. And her mother holding the baby didn't look much less of a pushover. But that is the way Divine Mother makes it, isn't it? Even just hearing about it, you can all see and feel what that is like. Many of you know them, but not all of you. But just the very idea of a newborn child and the love that its parents have for it. I remember talking to my mother at one point, and I don't know what prompted it, but my mother had been a school teacher before she had the 3 children, my brother and sister and I. And she was a very affectionate mother. And I asked her in some context what the best part of her life was. And what she told me was, when you 3 children were small and you belonged to me. And I know I could feel even in that, look what happened to that cute little child. That amenable, yes, mommy little thing turned into me. I remember being with my nephew, who grew up to be a very big, strong man. And he, of course, was once really small and was an adorable little boy, and then he became a big, strong man. And we were in a restaurant together, and I saw a family. It looked like parents and grandparents, and then the little baby, and all 4 adults were totally focused on the little baby, just entirely. I wanted to drag my nephew over and say, this is what's going to happen. Enjoy it while you can, because this is what's going to happen. One more on this same thing. At Ananda Village, there's what's now called Hansa Temple, which is at the top of a hill, and that hill commands a view of the whole central area of the community. What we call it downtown, but it doesn't look anything like downtown. It's just the central area. I was having lunch on the balcony overlooking that, and I saw a friend of mine and his little daughter. She was about 5, and there was about a 20-yard space between them. The little girl saw her daddy, started yelling loud enough so that I could easily hear, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." She runs across and hurls herself into his arms, knowing full well he's going to catch her. And all I could think was, how would it be possible not to have your happiness depend on that kind of devotion and that kind of love? We talk in life about feeling the divine behind everything and loving for the sake of the divine, not becoming caught up in the form in which things express. But oh my goodness, Divine Mother did not set up a world in which that is easy, is it? She sets up a world in which we are so drawn to each other, but we're drawn to each other for what we see and what we feel, and for the words, and for how adorable and how helpless the little baby is. I had a strange karma in my first few years at Ananda Village, my first 10 years actually. I had 2 extremely strong karmic connections with 2 different women. And one of them was a soul sister like I never had before or since. It was Seva. Many of you know her. She died a year or 2 ago. She was 12 years older than me. So she lived to a ripe old age. And we were just soul companions. I loved her like I'd never known how to love anybody before. And I was with her a great deal. Simultaneously, I was very often, with another woman whose name I won't say, because we were karmic enemies. I don't know what we did to each other in past lives, but it was impressive, because it carried us right into this one. And she was a deeply sincere devotee and totally dedicated to this path. But nonetheless, she just barely had to breathe to make me terribly upset with her and totally justified in my annoyance. And she shared that experience with me. We were constantly like cats, so badly that Swamiji on more than one occasion had to intervene. So I was very, very early on the spiritual path, and I hadn't yet practiced discrimination as Lahari was reading it to us today, but I was in there pitching. I was trying. So I knew that I was supposed to be even-minded and cheerful at all times, and yet I was exceedingly elated by one and utterly aggravated by the other. So there was this great difference. So I came up with what to me at the time seemed like a really bright idea, that I needed to equalize these relationships because it was the extremes that was causing me so much trouble. So I said to Swami, it's not so much that I dislike this one, it's that I love this one too much. Swami was generally very delicate with me because I was vulnerable at all times during those years. But my recollection is, he said, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. And if it wasn't those exact words, which he did speak to me on another occasion also, I don't remember now what the occasion was, but I believe this was the first time. That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. He said, Master's intention in giving us these great love affairs, in whatever form they take, romance, friendship, parent-child, child to parent, is to teach us our capacity for loving and to show us the joy of that utterly selfless giving of ourselves for the welfare of another, where one would willingly, without hesitation, give up one's life for the sake of the one that you love. Just effortlessly one would do that, because that's where we're going. But that kind of loving, and so it's not at all, of course, that I should bring the top down. I should bring the bottom up, and learn. But as long as we're always thinking about what you're like, what my preferences are, this is the kind of person I like, this is what I want, you treat me this way. If we're always weighing and measuring, the word Maya, which is the magnificent Sanskrit word for the fact that we look at this world and see a false reality, delusion. Sometimes they speak of Maya as the measurer, which is a very interesting and subtle way to say it. They're always measuring. How much will I give to you? What am I risking by giving to you? How can I make sure that I don't get drained, but that I also get fulfilled? It goes on and on and on We're always weighing and measuring because we're vulnerable inside ourselves, isn't it? Because we walk in this world with this desire to feel joy at all times, but we measure how we give it, and we're only even able to give it when it's drawn out of us in a certain way. Daddy, 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 holding this little form that's come into a family. You know, and you think of all the, you have no idea, one has no idea how many experiences we've had before and what the destiny is going to be. By the time a child is born to a grown-up, you know, that grown-up's life, I mean, the whole world, especially these days, has completely shifted. You know, what world is this child being born into? And how will I protect it? Or how will I let that child go free? You know, parenting is the most intense kind of love. The Vedas say, interestingly, that the closest human relationship is between a mother and a son, that the dynamic of that relationship brings the souls closer together than any other. This is just, I'm quoting scripture. I can't defend it or speak of it, I just know it's true. It actually came out interestingly because a friend of mine was pregnant with a male child. And even though she loved her husband, during the pregnancy, she didn't like him very much. And it was a terrible dilemma that she was experiencing. And Swami then, that was when he quoted the scripture, sometimes a male child in the womb of the mother wants the mother only for itself and projects an energy that wants the father not to be around. Even if the child grows up with a loving relationship with the father, during that time it wants the mother only for itself. You know, we have no idea what's really going on in this world. And that is the great challenge. Now, our affirmation for today, especially the words that Lahari was reading, it makes it so simple. Discrimination is to measure every idea against divine truth, against the highest that we can understand of that which is. And every choice that we make, every inclination of the heart needs to be measured against that. And the other part of it, which, you know, in a couple of paragraphs we can't tell the whole story, but then we also have to be authentic and realistic about how close we can come to that. This is this wonderful word that Swamiji has given us, which is a word well worth contemplating, which he says all spiritual growth is directional. And it's not in the way that we look at this world, especially in the Western mind, is very much about either or. It's either black or it's white. And we often get quite confused just trying to make it either or, that this is right and that's wrong, when in fact this is less wrong and this is more right than something else. But it's not always that everything we do can reach that perfect standard. So what we have to ask is simply, how can I be better than I was? Just to be better than I was. Gary this morning in our purification ceremony was talking about his 30 years of experience with our Living Wisdom School here and all the children. And he said something that was so simple and so true. He said, those children who thrive in our atmosphere are not necessarily the ones who excel the most, but they're the ones who try, who consistently try to do what is being asked of them and to expand from where they're standing into a more beautiful and more capable reality. This is not failure. You know, this is not being separate from the divine. It's simply realizing this is where I stand, this is where I'm going. And how can I be a little better? How can I love a little more? How can I be more of the ideal to which I aspire? Swamiji told us at one point in a conversation, I don't think it was written. He said, if you judge yourselves, and then he said, which I don't recommend, which I love that, just sort of parenthetically. If you are inclined to judge yourself, he said, you are energy in motion. This is one of the things we have to understand. This form that we apparently have, well, it's energy in motion. The form that I have today is not the form that I had yesterday. I remember, speaking of mothers and children, just one of those images of childhood. My mother had all of us children when she was in her 20s, so she must have been in her early 30s when I had this memory, which from this perspective is really young, but from the perspective of being 4 or 5, looked pretty old. And I remember my little foot next to her foot. And I remember thinking how sort of aged her foot looked, how old her foot was. And the actual word is worn out and horrible, is sort of how I thought about it. And my new little foot. Everything about a child's body is so new. But it's the same form. That body that I was living in when I was a child, this is the same one. I haven't traded it in, but the form is constantly shifting, isn't it? Who am I? When you just use the pronoun I, what am I really talking about? Me on my best day? Me on my worst day? Me in meditation? Well, once I had this experience with Swamiji this was when Seva and I were with him one evening. And I think she was giving him a head rub, something he was face forward, and I was just sitting over here. And there was just the 3 of us in the house. And he said, is Asha still here? And I said, and I was behind him out of sight. I said, yes, sir, I'm sitting over here. And I had fallen, risen. I say fallen because it was no action of my own. I was feeling extraordinarily peaceful and uplifted in Swami's presence, which I always felt better than I did when I wasn't with him. But this was a very notable, different state of consciousness. So he said, and I spoke and I said, I'm here. He said, why can't I feel your consciousness? I said, sir, because it's quite a bit calmer than it usually is. And he shut his eyes like this, and then he said, oh yes, there you are, just like that. And it was so fun with him because he saw our forms. He saw what we looked like, but he was remarkably, he very little defined us by what he saw. Another delightful moment was when he was walking down the street with Nirmala, who occupies a female body. And he was walking down the street, and there was a very unattractive dress or some extreme something in a window, a mannequin dressed in something. And he turned to her and he said, if you were a woman, would you wear that? And Nirmala said, well, as it happens, sir, I am a woman. And no, I wouldn't wear it. But it's like, and there was one, I told this story in my book about him, the first book. This couple was separating within the community. It was very sad, but their marriage hadn't worked out. It had always been a bit problematic. And a few months earlier, I had gone shopping with that woman, I think to buy her husband a present, her then husband a present. And I saw a shirt that was a particular color, and I said, this would be wonderful for him. It's the same color as his eyes. She said, is it? Meaning she was telling me she wasn't sure what color his eyes were. And I just filed that away. I didn't know what to do with it. And then we're having dinner, and there was a group of us at the table. And we had just unfortunately heard that they were separating. And I said, I went shopping with her, and she wasn't sure what color her husband's eyes were. That didn't seem to me like a promising sign. And there was this moment when you were with Swamiji a lot, you learned to read the silences. Sometimes the silences were telling you that there was something you needed to pay attention to. And whereas everyone else at the table just, made the obvious remarks, just like me, there was an odd silence from Swami. And after we had finished, he said, I have no idea what color people's eyes are. He said, I never look at their eyes, I look through them. And obviously the eyes are the window to the soul. Swamiji said he could just glance at someone's eyes and he could see their whole consciousness like that. Just one glance, he said. So he was relating always to consciousness. Why aren't you here, Asha? I can't feel your consciousness. If you were a woman, all these things that are so ordinary to us. And Seva, as it were, who'd been Swami's close co-worker forever, she happened to be sitting next to him at the table. He said, Seva, for instance, he said, I have no idea what color her eyes are. And she had these huge brown eyes. It was like the first thing you saw. I don't know what color her eyes are. And so he kind of looked at her. It kind of changed his perspective, and he looked like that. He'd been looking at this woman for, 15 years at that time. Saw her almost every day. Oh, he said, they're brown. There are many times, of course, in my life with Swamiji above all, but many times when I realize that what we're trying to do here is so different than what we think. We're not just being a better iteration of the one that I already am, like this. We're trying to completely disintegrate all this that we call ourselves, that we're so proud of, that we're so busy working with. We're supposed to recognize what we really are. This is what Jesus said to his disciples. I am the vine. You are the flower, the leaf, the fruit. But without the power of the divine, we're nothing. And what we're doing here is we're trying to let go of this, not to make it a supercharged version of this, but just the opposite, to realize, this is just a Halloween costume and not a very nice one, just a cheap one from a crummy store, that this is just nothing that I would really want to stay and be. What I really want to be is this effulgence. This is again where the Gita says, everyone who shines in this world, they're not shining with their own energy. They're shining, and this is the Lord speaking. It's my energy through them, my energy. Master's most advanced male disciple was Rajarsi Janakananda, James J. Lynn, a self-made millionaire himself, very successful businessman, very effective in the world. But when he came with Master, he was like Master's little child. And every so often, seemingly, Master would say to Rajarsi, never forget where your power comes from. And Rajarsi would say to Master, I know, sir, it comes from you. This is a man who founded companies and had countless employees and had so much power in this world. But he knew where it came from. Anyone who shines in this world, the effulgence is from the divine. And then Jesus promises us, he promises us in this verse, that everything that doesn't serve to make your light shine brighter, I'm going to trim it away. And everything that doesn't serve is, everything. Just pretty much everything that causes us to not understand who we are and where our power comes from. But what we also have to understand, and this is the only way that we can live happily in this reality, is that all of this love that we feel, the way a parent loves his child, the way Peter held his little daughter and Gayatri held her little daughter, and you could just see and feel in this tiny little photograph, just so much of the divine light shining through us. Why does God give us these opportunities to love? Why did I had such a dear and I have such a dear and wonderful soulmate friend like that, so that I'll know what is possible. And it's to give us a taste, just a little bit of a taste of what it would be like to really just live all the time in that flow of energy, to be that free, to be that fearless, to be that unconcerned about what happens to me. If we are one with the infinite, if we are the vine, if we are just the tip of it. I saw, walking through our community yesterday, right near where the manager's office is, there's a couple of rose bushes, and there was a largish bush with a very tall stem and a really bright, beautiful red rose at the top. And there weren't many other blossoms on that bush at the time. I felt like this one wanted, just to be itself. But you couldn't separate that beautiful flower. There was no place that you could separate it from the rose bush itself. You couldn't have the rose, even though when you looked at it, what you saw was the rose, but you couldn't separate it. I was looking at this huge tree. Having lived in this community for decades, I often take the same walks, and I was walking just to the park there. And there was this huge tree, beautifully shaped, like this, big, strong trunk, very strong tree. And it stops at the ground level. This is so obvious, but I'd never seriously thought about it in the same way, that what gives it its power is what you can't see. Because in order to support all that strength, it had to also go deep into the ground, because otherwise it would just fall over. And so what happens to us is that if we think that what we can see is what we are, and we try so hard to get our power from this point of view, we're always nervous. Whether it rises to the conscious level or not, but we're always nervous. If my happiness depends on how you feel about me, on how I accomplish in the world, whether I have money to do what I want, whether I still look young and beautiful, or whatever it is that we're trying to be, we're balanced. We're taking this huge thing, we're trying to just balance it like this. And even if we can kind of hold it briefly, we're so vulnerable. Just one little loss and we're just over. But if we know that rose cannot exist without the bush, that I cannot stand here without deep, deep roots into the divine, that's the only way. That's the only way we'll ever be happy. What to speak of at peace. And then when things happen, because inevitably they happen. I was taking my wonderful grown-up nephew to the family where everybody's loving the baby. This is going to happen. But this is not bad. This is just different. This is just different. Because it's the nature of this world to keep rolling. My mother, I loved, my favorite time was when you were small and you all belonged to me. And yes, we should enjoy it. It's not that we should hold back. It's not that we should equalize our great loves by bringing them down a little bit. We should love with all our heart. But what we should understand is it's the joy of loving. And even if only one or two items bring that out of us, what we should learn how to do is to bring it out of ourselves. And to understand that everywhere we look, where is God not present? Yes, sometimes he's more annoying than he is in other forms. That's a fact. And sometimes the love is sweeter than it is at other times. But we have to sink our roots deeply and weigh everything against that divine truth and listen to the words of Jesus. I am who you are. And I will make you like me. I will make you free. And he will, whether we want him to or not. And he will, whether we enjoy the process or not. Because we are, like David was singing, life flows on like a river, homing to the sea. And we can either cooperate with it and find the joy of the journey, or we can resist. But we will be taken there anyway. So let us embrace the lessons that God gives us and find the joy in his presence. Bless you.